Windsor Hills. So I live on the east side of Culver City and just drive up on La Brea to go to the Grove. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we going to able to see like how many people are joining?
Sure. So we're going to kick off here in about 5 minutes. And the people that are not speaking, I'm going to turn everybody's video off. And how we start the event is we go live and I put up the social card. And when we go live, people come into the room gradually, just so it's not an abrupt start. So we just ask that everybody remain muted. I'll invite Kelly to come on, usually at like 11:02. Kelly will come on, she'll introduce the event, thank Bank of America, say a few words, and then I will turn on the video for the speakers. And then for 40 minutes, Kelly will conduct the strategy session. Kelly will field questions that come in from the audience. And then we'll end at 11:40. Kelly will introduce Sam. All you ladies are welcome to leave at that point or stay on and watch. And then Sam will do a 20-minute interview with Aditi from Upfront. She's going to come on at 11. So as soon as she gets here, we'll get started.
Annie, is this the type that is a live speaker type of mic? So if whoever even mumbles or talk, that's the face that's going to come up on the screen. Is that how it works on this?
Yeah, so it just depends on what the view is. So in the top right-hand corner of the screen, it's depending on how the attendees have their view. So if they have it on speaker, then they'll just see the person speaking. If they have it on gallery, they'll see all of the speakers, which I have on now.
Oh, okay. So that's my question. You want to make sure that even though if we're not speaking, have to look engage our camera.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. If you're not speaking, it's, be engaged would be great.
Right. Yeah. Because I've been to events where only the live speaker is on camera. I want to make sure that's how it works.
Yeah. We had an event, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and when it was a panel and the person wasn't speaking, she was just doing like work on her computer, looking the other direction.
Okay.
So yeah, if you could just be cognizant of that, that would be great.
Good.
Okay, so just a few more minutes.
Good luck, everyone. Thank you, Sasha and Yang Hee, for joining us. So excited.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, of course.
Then Annie, if Aditi comes on late, I mean, that's still okay, right? We can just get started. Yeah, because
I'll
it's
be
not
looking out for her, and I'll just make sure her camera's off. So that's totally fine.
Cool.
So yeah, even if she's not here, I'll just kick off.
Sorry for the background noise for a second. I just, Young Hee, I wanted to confirm the pronunciation of the company because I don't want to. Is it real or rail? That was something. Ryle. Okay, perfect. It was neither of the ones that I was thinking. Glad I asked.
Kelly, as much as I love the Caleb crosstalk on our internal meetings, we're not going to have that. Live,
yeah, right? Sam, obviously, don't worry. It'll be 10 and 11. I put that in the chat. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. And then Sam, will you just close out the event? I'll Slack you the verbiage.
Yeah, of course. Sure.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn everyone's camera off. If you can just make sure that you are muted. I'm going to start the event promptly at 11. I'll have the shared screen up. Like I said, I'll invite Kelly on, and then when she's ready to introduce the speakers, I'll invite you to start your videos. So thank you everybody so much. We're looking forward to a insightful conversation.
Thanks everyone. Be great.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Super excited to virtually see you. So this is the next installation of .LA's strategy session. I'm Kelly O'Grady, .LA's chief host and head of video, and I'm thrilled that you all could join us this morning, even if only virtually. So March, it's Women's History Month, and here at .LA, we are committed to highlighting female founders all throughout the year, but particularly in this historic month. And it's something that I'm personally very passionate about, so I'm very eager for this conversation today. We're going to be chatting with a number of female founders and investors today about the opportunities and challenges in the space to better understand how we can support these dynamics. So before we dive in, I wanted to thank our partner for this event, Bank of America. They are one of these companies that is committed to investing in partnerships that connect women entrepreneurs to the mentoring, training, and capital that they need to power their success, which is, of course, very important, especially coming out of the pandemic. And Bank of America invests in women globally and locally with partnerships like with the Tory Burch Foundation. And actually here in LA, they support the New Economics for Women to help create economic mobility for low-income Latina households, as well as NAWBO LA, which provides training and networking for women business owners. Bank of America also develops women leaders through supportive programs such as 2020 Women on Boards, a campaign to increase women members on corporate boards, in addition to the law that recently came into effect, and their Women's Employee Network Lead, which has over 30,000 members globally and over 1,000 within LA alone. So Bank of America, we appreciate so much your willingness to engage on this topic and your support today. So let's jump in. First up this afternoon, I'm going to be speaking with Slasha Plavsic, the founder of Ilya Beauty, Younghee Peck, the CEO and co-founder of Rael, and Grace Kingdani, the SVP and market manager at Bank of America. And following our discussion, .LA's co-founder and CEO Sam Adams is going to be speaking with Aditi Maliwal, who's a partner at Upfront Ventures. So just a couple of logistics before we get into the discussion. If you hear something that you like, please feel free to share it on social, share the wealth using the hashtag .LA session, which our director of events, Annie Burford, is going to pop in the chat for you. And if you have questions, please pop them in the chat or the Q&A function. Q&A function is a little bit easier for me to find, but that's okay if it goes into the chat. We want this to be as engaging as possible, even though we can't be with you in person. So let's keep the chat going as if we weren't virtual. And I'll be sure to include those questions as we go further along in our discussion. So without further ado, ladies, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here with me today. And I'd love to start by just having you introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your companies, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your founding or career journey, because I think that's always the first thing that I want to know when I'm talking to entrepreneurs and especially female founders. So Sasha, why don't we start with you, if that's okay?
Yeah, super happy to be here today. Thank you guys for having me. So my name is Sasha, I'm the founder of Ilya, and my journey did not start in makeup. It actually started in graphic design and branding. I have a typography degree, which came in handy when the packaging had to come along, but definitely not in anything related to beauty or business. So I had worked in design and creative direction for the first part of my life until I was 30 years old. And then I had a major freak out at 30 and left the guy, left the job. I moved back into my parents' place, which felt like a real defeat because I'd left when I was 18 and I had carved out a nice career, but I really felt like I needed to reconnect to home. And I lived in London and New York, and I went back to Vancouver, Canada. And when I got back there, my mom, who was excited to have me, and excited to look at what I had with me, started going through some of my toiletries and said, you really need to start thinking about what you're putting on your skin. And the reason that she was very aware of that is that when I was growing up at a young age, my brother was born when I was 4, and he had an autoimmune disorder that totally turned our family upside down. So really bad asthma. She actually would sleep on the floor of his room next to his crib to listen to him breathing. So all the rugs had to go, the curtains. He had so many food allergies, and he literally needed to be in the hospital for the first 10 years of his life, of which they wanted him to kind of live there. So she really had to think of problem solving. And I think even as founders or business owners, that's one of our biggest attributes that we need to do. And she figured out how to do that and heal him with more food and different homeopathics, and find a balance. And I think that's really what, in many ways, clean beauty is about. And back in 2009, when I came home, that category didn't exist. But I was surprised when she started saying, hey, look at these ingredients, to learn that many of them in there were not something I necessarily wanted going into my body. So I started researching, and what I found is that there was a lot of greenwashing or products that were really crunchy and not necessarily appealing to what I was looking for in beauty. So I decided to create a brief like I did in school and see if I could recreate my tinted lip balm, of which from that point, that was it. That the rest was kind of history. Of course, with major speed bumps in between, which I'm sure we'll get to. But yeah, that was the beginning of Ilia, and we launched in May 2011.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to the speed bumps and the freeways, right? The successes of the business. But thanks so much. I love hearing a founder story that is so personal and is born out of a personal need. I always find those super interesting. So thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself. Young-hee, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you.
So hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Young-hee Park. I am the CEO co-founder of Maliwal. We make organic, natural feminine care products, including pads and tampons, and also have clean vegan skincare line. A little bit about my personal background. So I have a pretty international background. I was born in Korea. I lived in Paris when I was little. My family moved to New Jersey when I was in middle school. But then my family moved back to Korea, so I went to college there and then worked there as a management consultant. But it was always my dream to come back to the States to go to business school. So I came back here about 15 years ago to go to business school. And my passion back then, to be honest, was to work in Hollywood in the entertainment business. So after graduating from an MBA, I moved to LA, joined the Boston Consulting Group, did media consulting for about 2 years, and then joined the strategy team at the Walt Disney Studios and worked there for almost 8 years. I did movie distribution in the digital space, so negotiated with big companies like Apple, Google, Amazon. That was my previous job. And as much as I love the company and then what I did in the movie space, after you spend about 8 years at the same company, you start to wonder whether this is like, whether you're continuously your passion or what your next steps would be. And for me, I think I was really looking for a position where I could be making decisions, more directly, and also do something that would touch people's lives and then make more positive impact on people's lives. So I was kind of like thirsty for that and was kind of looking for the next move. And that's around the time when I met my co-founders. So one of my co-founders is actually a writer, and she wrote about women empowerment, female leadership. And she reached out to me actually one day after reading about me from a newspaper. And we just got, met up one night and had a dinner together. And she told me everything about the harsh chemicals in the conventional pads and tampons, and that we can do something about it. And although I didn't have much background in the CPG or startup, it really inspired me that as a woman, we could do something about these products that touch our sensitive part of the body every month. And another kind of interesting angle was my co-founders and I, we are Korean American women. We moved here about 15 years ago from Korea, and the Korean feminine care products, we used to use or we could use when we go there are more advanced and higher quality. So another thing that we wanted to do was, while making natural, organic, healthy option for women, we wanted to bring the novel technology from Korea to make the products highly performing and very effective. So the products that we, offer to our consumers, we believe that they don't have to sacrifice, performance and comfort while choosing a healthy option for them. So that was the start of our journey, and I'm sure we're gonna get to, some of the other stories, how we got to really kind of grow the company.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. We share a lot of similarities in our background, so it's always fun to meet a fellow consultant in Disneyite or Disneyan, whatever you want to call us. So Grace, last but not least, I would love to hear about your background, your journey, and how this is a passion for you, supporting women in this space.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, Sam, Annie, and the .LA team. Thank you for the collaboration on spotlighting, celebrating, and amplifying women entrepreneurs on our platforms. My name is Grace Kangani. I lead the commercial bank team for Bank of America in Los Angeles that covers emerging growth companies in LA. So it's been such a great opportunity experience to work in this city, to see so many emerging brands, so many brilliant entrepreneurs. Many of them are women or women executives that I got the pleasure of working with. So Sasha, I'm a huge fan. I think I shared that with you. Ilia stick is one of my must-have in my cosmetic bag all the time. Yang He, coming across like a brand like yours that's emerging, it's always a lot of fun to meet companies like yours and many others. And unlike Yang He and Sasha, who have moved and changed roles, I've been a lifer banker, 20 years at Bank of America. I've been very privileged and blessed with so many great opportunities. While I've been here 20 years, I've changed jobs every 2-3 years. So in short, I've worked in 4 or 5 different divisions across Bank of America and currently leading the team here in Greater LA. Amplifying and supporting women entrepreneurs is a huge passion for me because it's deeply personal. My mother is an entrepreneur. She had to start her business out of necessity to win custody during divorce. I grew up in Indonesia, whereby it's very male-dominated, patriarchal type of society, that for a woman to emerge and start something to support her family, it's not unique, but it's still much a minority, and it's a very hard journey. So in the efforts of supporting women empowerment and amplifying their stories, I'm fortunate to be a part of Bank of America, the company who believes in the same core mission. And how do we make financial life better? How do we make connection? And this is what we do as part and parcel of our business. This is what we do. So in the event, I can always support other women entrepreneurs. I will think back of my mother's journey and how I wish she had a .LA. I wish she had that network. And I think we'll talk more about that, about building your network, your tribe. I wish she had more of that. She did, but I wish she had more of that so that she would flourish more. So thank you for the opportunity of being here.
Well, and thank you for the support from Bank of America. I love hearing that story about your mom, and she sounds like a powerhouse woman. I was going to use a different language, but we'll go with powerhouse. The other language maybe added a little more emphasis, but she sounds like an amazing woman, and we're so lucky to have people like you who are passionate about that, because we can't just have the women starting the companies. We need people like you providing that network and that platform, and that's of course what we're happy to do here at .LA. So we alluded to, there's a lot of stories, a lot of interesting pieces, speed bumps, freeways. I would love to start off the conversation, talking about those first few years when you're starting a business. Maybe you're thinking about getting funding. Sasha, I know in your case, you elongated those first years before you got to the funding process, but what are some of the assumptions that you're up against, and what do you feel like is the biggest barrier in that beginning, or raising money, kind of wherever you want to enter that conversation? We can leave the pandemic out of it for a second, because obviously that has created a lot of complications, which we can get to. But I'd love to hear about those initial years and those initial challenges you were facing. So Young Hee, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So, a lot of the challenges that we faced, I wouldn't say was because we were women, but because of the products that we were, pushing and trying to sell. Feminine care industry has been around for like 100 years, and only in the recent years, there have been disruptions, innovations happening, in the feminine care industry. So when we approached, investors, they were not very familiar with this industry to begin with. So there was a lot of explanations, we had to do to educate mainly the male investors who didn't know anything about, feminine care industry or the products that women use every month. So that took a lot of effort for us to really do a lot of pitching with a lot of kind of education about the products and industry itself. And, obviously a lot of people were challenging that this is an industry that is very much dominated by big companies, and whether as a small company, as an emerging brand, whether we would have a chance to actually fight with those like big companies. I think that was pretty much probably the biggest challenges that we're facing when we're pitching these ideas. Are you as a small company be able to really market in a big way to fight with P&G of the world? So but I think it was great that around that time, it was not just us, but we had a couple of competitors also looking into this opportunity in the market. So I think collectively, we kind of created this environment where, feminine care industry needs disruptions and innovations, and we, the female founders, are here to make that difference. And there have been a lot of big companies who have been pushing some new innovations, but none of them has been really focused on what women need or the organic natural aspect of, feminine care products. So I think we were very successful in telling that story initially, probably, in partnership with a lot of the other female founders who were looking into this opportunity. So we kind of overcame that hurdle a few years ago and were able to raise money successfully.
Yeah, and before we hop over to the other ladies, I just love to ask a follow-up question. What was it like in the room to educate, half the population doesn't go through this, lucky them. What was it like educating people that don't even know what a good product is, or kind of what were the things that you're looking for? Because I'm sure we have a lot of folks on the line that are in spaces that maybe men, don't necessarily interact with in their daily lives. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, initially before I met any, investors, I was a little intimidated, by those like sharp type of investors. But to be honest, I think it helped that these were the products that we use every month. We know this in and out, and there's no one better than us, to be able to really tell the male investors, what better products are in the feminine care space. And it's funny, we had this like board of all the pads kind of compared to each other, and then we would actually hand it over to the male investors and have them touch the pads and feel it and kind of actually see what they do and what they are like. So that was kind of like a funny education process where we felt like we owned it, and then who we were talking to actually didn't have much idea about this industry, that we were like we're kind of like more superior than our investors in a way. And some of the some of women would kind of like laugh at this, but there were actually some male investors asking, oh, the small size is for like smaller size women, the large overnight size are for like bigger women. They thought women use just like one pad a day. There was just such lack of knowledge about this space that it was kind of funny and interesting to have to start from a very basic information. But I think at the end of the day, because we had this conviction that, we had great products that would sell to women, we had this confidence and conviction that really, I think, told a story effectively to the investors that they also believed in what we were doing.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting that you frame it up that way, because I think you could go into those conversations feeling very intimidated, right? The person on the other side doesn't understand necessarily even how to evaluate if your business is worth investing because they don't understand the product. But like you said, that actually gives you such confidence because you're the expert in the room. You're always going to know more than them, which is a good frame of mind to approach those conversations. And Sasha, I mean, you're in the makeup space. Certainly that's, another one of the spaces that men don't necessarily play with every day in their lives, but they're more familiar with it. But I'd love to hear some of the challenges and successes that you faced in those first years, because you didn't raise capital for the first 7 years, right?
Yeah, we waited a really long time. And I think it was easier for us to do it in the end because we had proven ourselves in some way. And I had brought on a CEO, and the company had been through so many renditions. Like the first 7 years feel like many lives, and the last 3 years feel like, only a couple. But I would say in the beginning, there was the subjective challenge was doubt. And can I do this? And when I would tell people, I'm not going to take that creative director position in the US. I'm going to stay here and see if I can create a lipstick. Canada is a little bit more socialist, I'd say, in some ways. And what's great about the US is there's a real raw mentality to go for it. And I really felt like I did not have the support from anybody, no matter your gender, at home, of which I had to believe in what I was doing, and I had to believe in that idea. And a lot of people did not believe in it. So I'd say the beginning was really challenging, and the fear of, will this work? Is the product going to be okay? Is anybody going to buy it? You're putting your heart and soul into something for what was for me 2 years to bring it to market, which was walking into a store in Vancouver and asking them if they would carry my lipsticks. So I think it was I started very grassroots, and it made it easier per se in the beginning because I didn't have to convince too many people, and I could bootstrap my way through it. For those that want to start heavy and hard, and I think in today's world, you may need to consider doing that, especially with competition that's out there, depending on your industry. You will still have to believe in yourself when you enter that room to raise money, and you will have to find a way to get people to believe in your idea. I think that's no matter if you're going to do funding at the beginning or later, there will always be that challenge of being able to prove that. And if you believe in your idea, other people will believe in it. So kind of getting over that was one of the challenge. And then more from an objective standpoint was clean beauty. Our mission at Ilia is to protect and revive the skin. I suffered from a lot of acne. I had a lot of problems with products. The natural products had all these natural smells and different ingredients that actually would make me break out. And then the more conventional ones had a lot of synthetics that were aggravating my skin. So it's like I couldn't find a happy medium. And really what clean beauty is, it's the collision of natural, the best of natural and the best of synthetic for the most part, that is safe for the skin. And for us, we go a step further. We had active ingredients. We try to create products that really protect and revive and make the skin look and feel alive. So going to a lab and trying to explain what I wanted to do when this category wasn't really in existence and convincing them to do this with me, it was all relationship based. Getting them to trust my idea, getting retailers to trust my idea, getting investors to trust my idea. At the end of the day, I think in business, it's ultimately about relationships and building that trust. And it doesn't matter what stage you're at. I think you're always up against it, but definitely in the earlier stages, it is more of a challenge. And how you choose to do that, you do need some people skills. And if you don't have it, you need a partner that will need to bring it.
So there's so much that I want to unpack there. So many different threads, but I want to actually follow up on that last point about bringing on a partner, because I think, you see all different types of founding teams, right? So Young-hee, you're one of 3 co-founders. You were brought on for that business perspective, and Sasha, you're more of that creative, product person. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how you went through that process, evaluating, where do I need another skill set, or in your case, Young-hee, what are you bringing to the table? How are you going to create value in this business? Because I think a lot of people are sitting there going, I got to do it all on my own, and I don't want to give away equity. And oh my gosh, because you're already giving away equity when you have investors come in. And Grace, I'd actually like to start with you to get you involved of when you're evaluating, some of these investors, your investments, and you're seeing all of this. How are you thinking about the founding team? What's going through your mind when you're thinking about these different things?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We don't actually invest in companies directly, so just wanted to clarify that part. However, we do see a lot of entrepreneurs, and we do see a lot of companies that come through our desk for different discussions, whether they're loans, their accounts, or what have you. So we see many companies at early stages, at the growth stages, and then later on. A couple of things that are very important for us to when we make an assessment is like, one, do they know their product? Do they know their market? And how can they articulate that to somebody who's outside, like Young-hee educating her investor group of something that they're not familiar with? So for a founder, know your product, know what's the market that you're trying to target, know what your niche competitive advantage is, and articulate that to somebody who doesn't know and assume they don't know whatever the product is. It could be lipstick. You think like everybody knows lipstick. No, assume that they don't know what is different with your product. So tell your story, because that's your story, your competitive advantage. Then the second part is know the details. And when I say the details, sometimes it's what's your projections, what you're trying to target at. I'm going to add like 20% growth. I'm going to do it this way. Is it marketing? Is it going to Sephora? Whatever, know the details to back up your story. Again, how do you translate that to the people who don't know your product, and how that transmit and make the data back it up? Because ultimately the investors, like the bankers, like your advisors, they want to see the backup and be able to articulate that. They're going to measure you against that. So be realistic about it, but don't sandbag it either, just so that you show you're actually exceeding projections. So that, and the third part I would say is, like what Sasha said, have people who believe in you, have a network, because especially in the very, very beginning, we sometimes meet companies at pretty early stages, is have a network. Maybe you can't afford that big M&A lawyer yet, or the big advisors yet. However, if you have a network and you have relationships, you could bounce off ideas. You could actually talk to your banker. Maybe they know somebody else. Maybe they know an advisor. Like, have that network of people, and different kind of people. So if you're selling a woman specific targeted product, have men in the mix that's going to bounce off idea. Is it resonating with them too? Because at the current moment, a lot of the people with the checkbook, let's be honest, as it's still male dominated. So have them bounce off ideas. And that goes in everything that we do. Have sounding board that's different from you. I think like that's the three things. Know your product, know your value proposition, if it's a person in regular business like I am, and then back up with the data, know the details. Sometimes we talk to entrepreneurs and they're like, well, ask my CFO, or like pass it on. No, you got to know it too. You don't have to know how to run the projection model, but you could back it up and you tell the story. It's so much more convincing when you tell the story, be it you're the founder or your CEO or others, but know that. And the third part is build your network, build your tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, all three of those aspects resonate, especially the tribe piece, right? Because I think so much of this in the beginning, if I were to even think about starting a business, it feels like I'm out in an ocean. Where do you start? What does a business plan even look like, right? If you're not someone with a background like an MBA, that you, Young-hee, have, there's so many people that you can tap into to ask questions, to bounce ideas off of. And of course, I think especially as women, sometimes we don't want to reach out and ask for help, right? We want to come fully prepared. Like you said, you got to do that in the investor meeting, but that run up. But Sasha, Young-hee, I'd love to hear your perspective on some of the pieces that Grace mentioned, as well as that founding team, or later on when you bring someone else on, a CEO like you did, Sasha. What are the things that you're thinking about to make sure that you are best positioned?
So I'll go first. I mean, I was in a unique position where my co-founder reached out to me and I decided to join her to start the business. So there are three co-founders of the company. One is, she used to be a writer. The other one, she used to be a graphic designer, and they were looking for somebody with more business background like myself, to complete the founding team. So I think the great thing about our team is that we know our strengths and our weaknesses, very well, and then we don't really overlap from a skills perspective. I mean, to be honest, like in the old days, I would imagine that if I started something, I would probably do it with my MBA friends or, like someone that I used to work with. So it was a bit scary for me actually to, jump into this with my co-founders who I did not have a working relationships with. But I think it helped a lot that they knew what I was good at. I knew what they were bringing to the table, and then we were very, very collaborative, and then really understanding what each person is bringing to the table. So we had that respect from the very beginning, which helped a lot. And I would say also personality matters a lot. My writer co-founder, she's the ultimate optimist. So whatever we do, she's like, we can do this. She's always bringing that spirit to the table. My other designer co-founder, she's like a doer. So she just keeps her head down and gets things done. I'm kind of in the middle because I see all the numbers. I have a realistic view about where the company is going, what we can do, but still be inspired by both my co-founders to kind of just like, cheer us up. So I think having those complementary personalities to make the team is also very important. And being an entrepreneur is a very lonely journey. And sometimes you need the mental support, from your team or co-founders or investors. And it's always the easiest, to have co-founders to talk about the challenges and then the kind of negative things that you want to kind of talk about, because it's very difficult for the CEO to talk to the employees about the problems that the company is facing, or even like investors. You don't want to disappoint your investors with a problem. So having that discussion partner and also the sounding board and the mental support, I think it's great in our case where there are 3 women as co-founders.
Yeah, that mental support part, I'm sure I'm like picturing you guys like at 2 a.m. brainstorming and having all of those different personalities in the room, the optimist, the realist, and whatnot, really helps. But Sasha, you have a different journey. Obviously, you founded this and brought someone on later on. So I'm curious how you thought about that and how you evaluated where you needed the help and that extra skill set with Ilya.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the first 5 years of the business were really an exploratory period for me where I could make a lot of mistakes. I could move really slowly. I've got my kid who's probably going to walk in on me in a second here. That's why I keep putting my head that way. But working from home, that's a whole different chapter. But I didn't have kids at the time, so I was able to really focus in, and I actually burned myself out hard. I think after the first 2 years, I worked from like 7 a.m. till 1 a.m. with like a couple breaks. And you can do that. And you kind of in the beginning have to do a lot. I think you really do. And if you have more people or more funding, then you still have to make a profit. So I just tried to stretch as much as I could, and it was a benefit. It was also a disservice. One of my regrets is possibly holding on too long to not bring in more help. That being said, this category was forming slowly, and it didn't really take off until a couple of years ago. So timing was important. So yeah, 2011, 2014 came along. I got married, got pregnant, had a baby, and my dad passed away all within like a 6-month period. And my brother, who was part of the business for 7 years, it's great. He's family. It's not great because he's family. And you hear that often, and that was its own challenge. And I really realized that we were reaching a point where Sephora had called and knocked on the door in 2012. And said, we're watching you. We really like what you're doing. And I said, that's great. I don't have any money and I need to figure this out. So I think, I really realized the boutique world and the lifestyle world of where we were was one galaxy, and Sephora was a different galaxy. And I remember I went to a meeting and sat next to the head of color there, and who could be considered intimidating, though she is. I absolutely love her. But for some people, I remember she was kind of right in my face and asking me a few questions. And I think I even had my breast pump sitting next to me. And I remember I turned to her and I was like, you know what? I really don't know what I'm doing in this area, and I need some help. I was really vulnerable in that moment. And it was a room full of women. And there's a risk to that vulnerability. I think somebody can take advantage of it, or they can choose to step up and support you. And that's exactly what she did. And she introduced me to Linda Berkowitz, who is my partner now and CEO. And she is an absolute operator. She was president of Too Faced Cosmetics, SVP of sales at Bobbi Brown. She's been in the industry for over 30 years. And she had everything I knew I would never have. And I think it came to a point where you really have to start looking at bringing on people that know how to do what you don't want to do or shouldn't be doing. And it took time. She was patient. We toddled along for a couple of years before that was in 2016. And then we did or 2015, maybe 2016. Then we did our first raise in 2018, and then a second one in 2019. But it took time for the category to arrive. So we were able to put all these pieces in place. I gave her the CEO title because she is the CEO and I am the chief creative officer, and I was able to focus on creative marketing product, and she focuses more on the other operating side of the business. And the two of those together, I think, have put us where we are. There is no way that if I held on to all that, I'd be where I am today. You just cannot do it all, and you need a lot of support to get there. And you need to know when it is the time, I think, to bring that in. If you're doing it from the beginning or you're doing it later, I mean, the business is 10 years old now. Yeah, you do need the support.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that everything that you said is so important to remember as a founder, that you don't have to do it alone. And especially when you're reaching that burnout or you're reaching that space where I just don't have the background, right? I mean, you want the best possible product and business and be able to go out to investors, you know, like Lorice was saying, and be able to convince them that extra person. And we're running up on time. As we did our prep call. We're like, oh gosh, this is going to go by so quickly. The one piece that I'd love to get just some really quick thoughts on is kind of the elephant in the room, right? Like, this is a female founder panel. And when we chatted at the beginning, we didn't want to make this all about, men and it's us against them, because that's a fairly toxic mindset, right, to have when you're going into the room. But each of you have had very different experiences and perspectives in that space. So I just love, some very quick thoughts, because we're running up on time, about that experience. You've had when convincing investors, men, to believe in your product, or seeing, Grace, people have to do that, and kind of what women are experiencing versus male founders. So maybe Grace, you want to start us out quickly?
Yeah. So one thing that many women founders that we work with or come across have shared with me is they put on this nice presentation deck, they go on to the meeting, and they start talking about it. The man gets asked, like, how are you going to reach that projection? The woman gets asked, you have, say, 100,000 users, or this is your client base. How do you see that you can defend that? So it's still the same question. It's about their customer base. The angle is slightly different. It's very slight that people probably might even miss it. So I've heard this from different women founders. I would say just whatever way that they ask it, like, just own it and build your narrative and speak up for it. Again, the two things that I always say, people ask. I think Sasha said, ask for help. And the second part is build your network, build your tribe, because that is so meaningful. And within that network and your tribe, include the men along with it. They are your support, your sounding board. We can't do it on our own journey and just say, like, hey, it's women empowerment, we're going to keep running it. The best ones, we have to link up together and have them tell the story for us.
Yeah, we can't be on our own island.
For sure. Yes.
Young-hee, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, generally we've enjoyed working with male investors, but there was one thing shocking that I heard from one of the male investors, someone quite senior, a little more traditional, I would say, and their concern about female founders was the fact that there could be a conflict among co-founders. I think they felt women tend to be a bit more emotional, and then sometimes they get into conflicts and fights, they end up breaking up, and that can really lead to some of the damage to the business and the company. And it was just shocking because it was never something that I thought of, because we're women, we'll like fight and then we'll get so emotional and then we'll just give up and all that. But I think some male investors may have been concerned about that. I think because we're women, we talk a lot, we're very talkative and communicative. So, when there's an issue or challenge, we actually talk about it a lot more openly than men, I think. So we haven't really experienced that kind of emotional kind of conflict among ourselves, but it was just kind of like shocking to me that, there are some male investors out there who still view women as emotional and not as professional as men in a way.
Yeah, no, it's such an interesting perspective. And Sasha, I'd love for you to close us out, with your thoughts on it, because I love that everyone came into this, and I know you're going to come into it with a different perspective. It's helpful to hear all of these voices.
Yeah, I think, you have to really know yourself. And apparently I have a thick skin, and I don't really have an issue with anything male related or female. I kind of just look at it very similarly. Even like when we're hiring, it's like, who's going to fill this position? I would never think of anything related to how they look, what their background is, or anything. Like, it's just who is the best for this job. Same with an investor. Everybody, let's put all cards on the table and see who fits the bill as a relationship and as a connection. If with Linda, maybe if I'd had that connection with a man who had that experience, I would be bringing them on board. So I think it's really about knowing yourself and knowing who you can do something with, and then building that trust again. Have I had experiences at work? Like, I remember my first job, I had one of the owners of a branding company have his hand all over my leg at work. And, was there a Me Too moment? Sure. And I remember I froze and didn't say anything, but I don't hold on to that. And today you have to, I think, speak up if something is wrong in the workplace. But as far as actually finding the right partner, and saying that men will give you a more challenging time because you're making makeup or whatever it is, that could be true, but then you just have to keep looking for the person who you can connect with to make that happen. And that's really my viewpoint. And as a woman, if you want to do this, you will have to develop somewhat of a thicker skin. You cannot take it home with you. You will in the beginning. I remember I wanted to throw myself out of a window one day when one of our production runs went totally haywire and didn't work out. Today, it's like, all right, we just gotta, what's the solve? Let's move on. And I think as an entrepreneur, you eventually have to adopt the attitude that a lot of problems are going to show up and you just need to continually solve them. And whether you have men on your team, women on your team, you're doing it as a team together, and you're collectively, hopefully making sure that everybody's heard and working together towards a goal, that you all feel good about, and removing the rest of those barriers or emotions that we have that exists in society, that it only exists because we put it there. And it has existed much more in the past, but we are in 2021. Let's move past it, and let's work together.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that perspective, because I do think, that the Me Too piece that you mentioned, a lot of these movements have created this polarization, and that's not helpful either, right? Because then you come into every meeting, every investor meeting, every interaction with, what are you going to do that's wrong, right? And men on the other side are thinking like, okay, then I don't want to be in this interaction. And that's, of course, completely counterproductive to any of that. But I could continue talking about this for hours. We do have to wrap up. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you ladies for joining us. And I wanted to close with some quick thoughts that Grace and I were chatting about. Studies have shown that correlations between women in leadership and better outcomes across environmental, social, corporate governance issues, are there. And, Bank of America's investments in women reflect that value. And with that said, we were talking about, though, we have this discussion. It's great to highlight what you ladies are doing, but how does that translate to action, right? Like, how do we leave this discussion and then say, okay, that was wonderful. I'm going to put it all, in Pandora's box. I'm not going to actually think about this and take action. So I want to challenge and invite everyone that's on this Zoom call today. I want you to think about, is it how do you support the women and girls in your life, right? Is it getting on a phone call and providing that support, providing that place to vent? Is it signing up to mentor in a youth or women's focused organization? Is it forming a circle of trusted women in your life to help support one another if you're the founder or if you're the support, right? Being that person for someone else. So whatever it is, find what works for you. But I'm excited to see, kind of what we can do, and come back next year in Women's History Month. We can all maybe check in and see how things are going. But ladies, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, I want to turn it over to my CEO. So Sam Adams, the co-founder and CEO of .LA, is going to be speaking with Aditi from Upfront Ventures. So Sam, take the virtual mic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. That was really fantastic. And thank you to all of those panelists. That I thought that was a really fascinating conversation. Covered a lot of great topics. And yeah, now we're excited to move over to the investor and funder side of the equation, because these things are, all extremely interrelated. And so to that end, we are really, really pleased to introduce Aditi Maliwal from Upfront Ventures, one of the top VCs in LA and in the world. So Aditi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, and that was really a fantastic panel. So thank you to you and Annie and Kelly for putting it together. It was an awesome panel.
Yeah, no, I completely agreed, and I know that it was such a great panel that we ran a little over time. So excited to just jump into the conversation about your history and what it means to be a woman in VC, and how we can be improving all of these elements in the pursuit of gender equity. So Aditi, do you want to just give us the rundown and tell us how you got to this amazing spot that you're in now?
Absolutely. Happy to dive right in. So I guess for a little bit of context, so I grew up in Southeast Asia and came to the US for college, and actually came and went to Stanford and was in the Bay Area. Pretty much drank the Kool-Aid very early on, sort of knew I really wanted to get into tech. We had a lot of people come and talk about the tech industry. A lot of different venture capitalists came and did talks on campus, spoke in classes and things like that. And so decided to take the path of going into finance. I was a psychology major, but ended up sort of doing a lot of extra work on top of that and decided to go into investment banking, mostly because one, it's sort of a great starting point to get to know what the financial services world looks like, and you get a pretty good training ground. Spent about 2 years doing tech IPOs, debt offerings, stuff like that. Got to work on pretty cool IPOs, including Twitter at the time, and worked on a debt offering for them as well. And then moved over to working at a venture capital firm. Worked at an early stage fund called Crosslink Capital based in San Francisco. And I joined them, had the opportunity to just spend a lot of time sourcing, doing diligence, getting to know the ecosystem really quickly. And sort of there is where I started to, I would say, focus or specialize a little bit more in fintech, and, wanting to spend more time also with female founders pretty early on. So funded a few companies when I was at Crosslink, including Chime led their Series A, which is a neobank, and also a company called BetterUp. I led their seed round when I was there as well. Believed a lot in sort of the future of coaching, and just, growing as an employee, I think is so incredible if your employer is willing to help to pay to see your growth. And then, went over to Google because I really felt to be a stronger investor, I needed to understand how to operate. I needed to understand how businesses worked. I needed to understand how to think about launching products. And so at first I joined the M&A team at Google, so corporate development, doing everything from strategy projects to acquisitions to strategic investments, and then moved over to product and worked with a couple different products focused on users in emerging markets. At the time, I would say probably right before I left Crosslink for Google, I had met my now partner, Kara, who was a partner at Upfront Ventures. And a couple years into Google, Kara and I would catch up every so often, and she said, "Hey, are you thinking of getting back into venture? We should chat." And ended up having a great conversation with her, and ended up back in venture capital. And I mean, obviously met with all the other folks at Upfront as well, started spending more time down in LA, and then joined the Upfront team. I am actually based in San Francisco, so I technically opened our office up here. I say technically because unfortunately during COVID, we did give it up, but we're probably going to open it back up again once we're all back into the offices. But that's how I ended up at Upfront. And I spend probably most of my time investing in fintech. And then I spend a little bit of time, and then actually I also spend quite a bit of time investing in female founders and looking for the next generation of female founders within fintech or even outside of fintech as well. It's definitely a big theme for me personally.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and you mentioned that you were one of the lead seed investors in BetterUp. We talked on the call yesterday. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to pull in Prince Harry, who just got announced as Chief Impact Officer there, but maybe next time.
Maybe next time.
So you touched on something at the end of that I really wanted to explore a bit further. I mean, so women are incredibly underrepresented in VC. I think it's something like 5% of VCs are female, just a ludicrously low percentage. And so, and also the fact that you're saying your relationship with Kara, who's a good friend of .LA, kind of begat that. And so it shows kind of the way that you can build momentum on that. And I want to get to that in a second. But I feel like when I talk to VCs who are, from underrepresented backgrounds, whether it's gender or racial or anything, it's, oftentimes they kind of fall into two schools of thought. The one of, my identity doesn't necessarily play into that. I just want to be the best VC that I can and just find great companies. And then others who really want to make it part of their, personal mission to, specifically invest in and look at underrepresented founders. Where would you say you lie in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's a very interesting question because it feels like it's very black and white, or it's very sort of like one or zero or one. I don't think it's as binary. For me, it's definitely very gray. I do think, let's put it this way. I think a lot of us have disadvantages coming into these industries, right? We maybe don't look like everyone else. We maybe aren't necessarily, and maybe the standards for us are higher. Maybe the expectations are higher in itself too. But I like to believe, and this is probably very optimistic of me, that we do still work to some extent in a meritocracy. I'll caveat that with, yes, we don't necessarily always work in meritocracies, but you can find organizations which are oriented around being a meritocracy and are oriented around seeing what have you done. And if there is an alignment between their value system and your value system, then I think those are the types of people you want to work with. It's not to say, as I already said, I do spend a lot of time with female founders and I want to find ways to support more female founders. It's not to say that I'm an expert on D2C brands or I'm an expert on X, Y, and Z category. I like to think I spend most of my time in fintech, so I have a lot more background and knowledge there. So if someone's starting a company there, I can probably give very direct feedback or sort of spend a lot of time getting deeper with them. But I also realized that there aren't enough opportunities for female founders to get in front of a whole variety of other people, whether it's, some female founders maybe don't have access. I think there's also an issue of how do you present yourself and what's a successful presentation like? And then I think the third is the confidence, right? I think other demographics have been doing this for a lot longer, or there's like a sense of confidence and there's a self-esteem that exists, which for some female founders is great and already exists, and some female founders it isn't. So for me, it's a demographic I relate very well with. And so I want to be able to help my demographic. That being said, that's not to say that I don't want to spend time with other demographics too. I absolutely do. I just want to find ways to have alignment in my values and hopefully their values too. So that's probably how I think about it. I will say, there are plenty of venture firms that I've talked to, firms that said, hey, we're looking to hire a female partner, right? And I've had that. I've heard that before. And, people have said that to me. And part of me wonders, are you hiring me for my identity or are you hiring me for what I've done? And sort of how do you find what it is that what they're actually looking for? I think the optimist in me says, if I really like this place and I really like these people, then, I'm going to sort of overlook the association directly with identity and sort of say and hopefully believe that there is also my merits and my background that adds value here. But oftentimes anyone who sort of says that right off the bat, I'm not sure if there's necessarily an alignment for me and them. And so that's a decision that I think founders can make pretty early on when talking to investors. I think investors can make early on too. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Thank you. That's great. And you were talking earlier about fintech. I mean, that's kind of your sweet spot. And I know that you look a ton at the space and invest a ton in the space. And notoriously, that's also the fintech companies is maybe the most male dominated in terms of executive teams. So I was wondering, how does that factor in? Is it more women like you looking at fintech and that will help rise the tide, or what do you think specifically in that industry is kind of holding back the drive for equity?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's, there's a few things. I think there has to be there have to be more funders. I think there's also a world in which, so even if you look at fintech as a sector in general, for a long time, because it's such a heavily regulated industry, people didn't necessarily understand it as well. And so even on the investor side, there weren't a ton of investors investing in the category. I think that was one challenge of the fintech sector in general. I think the second thing is, speaking of regulation, people sort of feel that they have to have a really deep understanding, like they potentially have to have been a lawyer themselves or have to have built very successful fintech products in order to be able to build another fintech company. I will say there are plenty of companies, first-time founders who've never really done this before and sort of like have a vision and sort of know what they want to do. My biggest thing that I come back to with finding founders that I want to spend time with is I like to spend time with founders who, one, obviously are going after a large market and are people that that I would love to spend the next 10 years in a marriage, so to say, with. But two, I think it's really having a plan and knowing what you want to do. When you get capital, what is it that you want to do with it? I think oftentimes people sort of overlook that getting capital is, people think like, once we get capital, we'll figure it out. I actually think the opposite. I think, especially when funding a company, it's so important to know what you're actually going to do with the capital and why you actually need, I don't know, whether it's like $1 million or $10 million or 200, whatever it may be. But I think execution is really the biggest thing I think about. And I think a lot of female founders sort of overlook that and are sort of, that's a broad generalization. Perhaps I would say female founders maybe associate raising a lot of capital with like, people know what they're going to do. That's not necessarily true. Oftentimes people raise a lot of capital and have no idea how to do it. But I would say like the biggest thing I push female founders, especially ones who are thinking about starting companies in the fintech sector, is think deeply about what your plan is and what you want to go about doing. And then the capital will come. It takes longer, maybe, if you're in like more of a enterprise fintech solution as opposed to consumer. Obviously, there's going to be different kinds of questions people ask around compliance, around regulation, but also that's the case in many other industries too. Like we seem to forget, Sasha was talking about sort of the industries that she's in. There's a decent amount of regulation in any consumer product industry as well. And there's a decent amount of regulation around just anything to do with, we assume that fintech has a lot more because there are so many more governing bodies, but I always push female founders to sort of like look beyond the box and think about execution and think about the execution plan, as opposed to getting scared by hurdles like regulation and people having a lot more experience in the category.
It's great to know. Thank you. Aditi, I know that you have a hard out at 12, so I'll let you go in a second. But one thing that we wanted to really cover, and this is part of why I wanted to talk with you directly, is like, as we're talking with all of these women founders, like, and the idea of like allyship and support really factors into it, and the last panel was talking about that as well. But like, what can guys, white guys, like, how best can we be, helping create like an equitable space and, something that reflects kind of the society that we all want to live in?
Yeah, well, I have so many thoughts on this. I feel like we could have a whole separate panel on this, or a whole separate discussion on this.
Well, we're going to have you back soon. Yeah. I have about 12 more questions that we didn't get to get
totally.
to.
But I would say at sort of a high level, a couple of quick things. I think like let's start with like very tactical, simple things like behavior. Oftentimes investors will be like, oh, this is something my wife would use. No one wants to know that your wife would use this. No one even cares if you didn't necessarily have to say you would use it. Oftentimes I think about fintech products, for example, and people will be like, oh, I don't know if I would use that product. You may not be the demographic. Like, think very clearly about who that product is being tailored to and who that product is being built for. Having your own opinion on whether you or your wife would use it isn't necessarily relevant to the conversation in many cases. In some cases, sure. So I think like that's tactically just saying stop or not saying things like that probably help. I would also add that in general, it's probably pretty important to ensure that you're sort of giving space to these people, giving space to female founders, giving them space to speak, giving them space to sort of come in and be able to pitch, even if it's not necessarily a space that you would invest in. But, I've seen this, for example, you're a big sports fan and you really like investing, or you wouldn't necessarily invest in a sports company, but you're a big sports fan, so you'd give someone a shot and go and listen to their pitch. Just the same way for female founders, you may not necessarily have a personal interest, or you may not as a firm be making investment decisions in that category, but still, I think offering 15-20 minutes of your time to even give feedback is something that people truly cherish and learn a ton from. And so that's something I think about all the time, is just making myself available, even if it's maybe not necessarily a category I'm super excited about or I wouldn't personally invest in, but even feedback is something that could be really valuable to founders. And then lastly, I would add is ensuring that you're spending time actually, getting to know the founder, not just because we're spending time together because you're a woman, or we're spending time together because you're such and such demographic, but really what's your story? Why is it that you want to spend time in this category? What brought you here? What relevant experience do you have to start a company in this space? I think really getting to know someone for who they are is something that investors oftentimes overlook, or people will completely overlook, and it becomes very transactional. And to me, that's again a misalignment in value systems. And I hope that we can sort of increase the access of one, investors' time, but also getting to know really why people do what they do. And that's something that's very important to me. So I hope that other folks realize the importance of that too.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great sentiment to leave us off on. So thank you, Aditi, so much for joining us. Really enjoyed having you. I'll let you drop now. I have a couple of announcements to make, but really great having you. Want to have you back soon. But yeah, have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Talk soon.
All right. Bye, Aditi. All right, and thank you so much to Aditi and to all of our panelists earlier. Really appreciate all of your time and insight, and I hope that the audience did as well. I really think that it's important for us to commit to creating an equitable space in tech, in venture capital, in all of this. And as we approach the end of this Women's History Month, hope that it's only the beginning or continuation of this broader drive and conversation. So thank you all very much for coming. A playback of this event will be on the site on .la by the end of the day. So keep an eye out for that, and please, share anything that you thought particularly insightful or interesting from this conversation. Make sure to sign up for .la's daily newsletter. It comes out at the end of the day. One-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in LA tech and startups. Please, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Do great stuff, and hope to see you back at our event soon. I also wanted to make an announcement about our upcoming Spring Tech Media Entertainment Summit, .la Intersect 2021, that we're really excited about, is on April 28th. And more information on that will be coming out next week, but please keep your eyes open for that if you are at all interested in that space and where it's going. It's going to be really excellent. So yeah, with that, that's all from us. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending part of your day with us, and hope to see you